Hidden behind Melbourne's main streets lies a maze of laneways, bursting with art, coffee, and unexpected stories. But Melbourne's laneways didn't start out, in fact, as trendy places for coffee or street art. Nope, they began as service alleys in the 1800s, used for carts, delivery wagons, and access to stables and even outhouses. Now, when the city's wide streets and strict grid took place in the 1830s, planners left narrow passageways between blocks for practical reasons, definitely not for charm. Now, fast forward to the 1980s, many of these laneways were dark, neglected, or even earmarked for demolition. Then something changed. Local artists, cafe owners, and independent retailers, well, they reclaimed them. In this video, I'll explore 16 of Melbourne's famous laneways, from Hosier and Degraves to Hardware, and of course, the very famous AC/DC Lane. So let's explore Melbourne's incredible laneways. All right, well, let's start off with one of the best, Degraves Street. Degraves is located across from the iconic Flinders Street station and is connected to Flinders Lane. The laneway is packed with coffee shops and restaurants and features heritage stonework and cafe umbrellas. Now, we love this laneway so much that we had breakfast here 3 times during our visit. The laneway is an interesting place to people watch and has a mix of both locals and tourists. Degraves Street has a real European feel with outdoor cafes, tiled walkways, and an intimate atmosphere. And this is not by accident, as the laneway's design was inspired by European arcades. Degraves Street is named after William and Charles Degraves, 2 English brothers who arrived in Melbourne in the 1840s and built a successful flour mill on nearby Flinders Lane. Degraves may not be known for street art, but it is known as a great place for food, coffee, and people watching. Just across Flinders Lane from Degraves Street is Centerplace. Centerplace is a slightly more gritty version of Degraves Street and probably what you might imagine a Melbourne laneway might look like. There is a real authenticity with Centerplace. There are small juice bars, espresso shops, and restaurants, and it's a great place for urban photography. Honestly, this is one of my favorite laneways, so if you're in Degraves, don't forget about its smaller neighbor, Centerplace. Not too far from Centerplace is Block Place, which links the Block Arcade to Little Collins Street. This is not a gritty and grungy laneway, but actually has a certain polished atmosphere with a definite feel of Europe. The laneway is lined with espresso bars and small restaurants. Now, long before Melbourne was actually known globally for its coffee obsession, Block Place helped spark the movement. Places like Cafe Segovia, which opened in the 1980s, turned coffee into a social ritual. About a 3-minute walk from Block Place is Presgrave Place. And this laneway is definitely different, as it's lined with framed artworks glued or even nailed directly into the brick. Artists hang small portraits, pop culture references, stickers, and statements. Now, no one actually knows who started the tradition of framed artworks in Presgrave Place, but some do believe it began as a guerrilla street art movement in the early 2000s, while others say it was inspired by European-style salon galleries. Clearly, though, there's no formality or even cohesive design here, and that's really what makes this laneway unique, interesting, and worth visiting. Hosier Lane is Melbourne's best-known street art laneway and is directly opposite Federation Square and easy to find. What you will find also is layers upon layers of graffiti that coat just about every surface, from walls, windows, bins, and even bollards. And this laneway is also an active and ever-changing canvas, as you'll likely see artists painting here daily. So grab a coffee, mind your step and the crowds, and wander this famous laneway. Now, there are many stories associated with Hosier Lane, and one of them involved the world-renowned street artist Banksy. Banksy actually once had a piece of his art in Hosier Lane, featuring a rat with a parachute. However, in 2012, the work was accidentally destroyed when a city contractor mistakenly removed it during a cleaning effort. Oops. This sparked debates over the city's approach to preserving street art, given that Banksy's works are now worth millions. Named after the band, the raw and gritty AC/DC Lane honors Australia's rock history. It was actually once the home to the famous Cherry Bar. Now, walking through the lane, you will see murals of Bon Scott and other music legends. Hidden among the lane's graffiti and murals is a small tribute to AC/DC's High Voltage album. If you look carefully, you can spot the artwork inspired by the band's electrifying sound. Now, as you can imagine, it wasn't always called AC/DC Lane. The alley was originally called the very boring Corporation Lane, but in 2004 it was renamed in honor of AC/DC. Duckboard Place continues where AC/DC Lane ends. During World War II, Duckboard Place was part of Melbourne's Duckboard Club, a social venue set up for soldiers returning from service. The club provided a space for servicemen to relax, have a drink, and connect with fellow soldiers. The name Duckboard comes from the wooden planks used in muddy trenches during the war, a fitting tribute to the soldiers who passed through. Now, it's an overflow for street artists, but is slightly more subtle than Hosier Lane. All right, as we leave Duckboard Place, we do have about a 10-minute walk to the next laneway, Meyers Place. Located between Burke and Little Collins Streets, Meyers Place is small and easy to miss. The laneway played a pioneering role in Melbourne's small bar culture. In the 1990s, when Melbourne was dominated by large pubs and nightclubs, a tiny, unassuming bar called Meyers Place Bar opened in this laneway. It was one of the first small bars in the city, paving the way for Melbourne's now famous laneway nightlife. Though the original bar has since closed, its influence remains, with trendy bars and restaurants now filling the space. We'll now head into Chinatown, where we'll find Croft Alley. This alley is notoriously difficult to find, and it's this hidden nature that adds to the alley's underground, almost secretive feel. Once you've found the alley, you'll then discover the layout is winding and almost maze-like. Back in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Croft Alley was part of Melbourne's old Chinatown, which had a reputation for gambling dens, illicit opium houses, and underground crime networks. Some stories have even said that Croft Alley was once an escape route for those avoiding police raids. As we make our way through Chinatown, we'll find Tattersall's Lane, which is a raw brick and neon strip off Lonsdale Street. Before the grand red and gold arches of Chinatown on Little Burke Street, Tattersall's Lane was one of the first areas where Chinese immigrants settled in the 1850s during the Victorian gold rush. Many small businesses, opium dens, illegal gambling houses, and traditional tea houses once lined the laneway. This laneway now hosts affordable dumpling restaurants and rooftop bars above graffiti-covered back doors. We'll now leave Chinatown and head towards the Queen Victoria Market, where we'll find Blender Lane. Blender Lane is often considered the heart of Melbourne's street art movement. In the early 2000s, before places like Hosier Lane became famous, Blender Lane was a raw, unpolished canvas for graffiti artists and muralists. Many of the city's best-known street artists started out painting here before their work spread across Melbourne and the world. About a 10-minute walk from Blender Lane is the wonderful Guildford Lane. Converted warehouses now house cafes, photography studios, and quiet residences. The best known of the businesses is probably Crimper, a cafe and a repurposed furniture factory. Guildford Lane was originally part of Melbourne's industrial district, home to warehouses, printing presses, and mechanics. For decades, it was a rough working-class area filled with factories producing everything from textiles to iron goods. Now, you won't find graffiti or neon in Guildford Lane, but what you will find is a slow rhythm with an almost, dare I say, European or New York vibe. The Laneway is also a popular location for TV and movie shoots. Hardware Lane sits between Burke and Lonsdale streets. It's wide enough for outdoor dining, yet narrow enough to keep cars out. By day, it's casual, and by night, there's live jazz, wine lists, and a ton of atmosphere. In the 1950s and 60s, Italian immigrants introduced Melbourne to European-style coffee culture, and Hardware Lane was one of the first places where espresso machines began appearing. The Laneway became a gathering place for artists, writers, and intellectuals who would sip coffee for hours while discussing politics and philosophy. Niagara Lane is one of the few laneways that still reflects early Melbourne's warehouse architecture. Narrow, quiet, and lined with red brick buildings, it has maintained its original cobblestone surface. Now, you might be wondering why it's called Niagara Lane. Well, Niagara Lane takes its name from, as you can imagine, Niagara Falls, and it's believed that early gold rush era traders or visitors from either Canada or the U.S. may have given it its name. Just around the corner from Niagara Lane is Rankins Lane, and this is another laneway that's very easy to miss. The star of this lane is Manchester Press, a cafe and a former printing house, and this is where coffee gets serious. Rankins Lane is yet another laneway that was saved from developers, and today it remains a rare surviving example of an original Melbourne service laneway, complete with old red brick walls and historic signage. And finally, and by special delivery, we'll arrive at Postal Lane. Tucked between Swanston and Elizabeth, it's home to Father's Office Bar and open-air tables spilling from restaurants. This is most certainly not the best known of the laneways, but it is a wonderful place to seek shelter and solace from the busy city. So there you go, Melbourne's incredible laneways.